We're already almost halfway through April. Feel old yet? Welcome to IU Sports Sunday. Nick Rotacap with you. We have a lot to talk about, as it seems like we always do on this show. It's Masters Sunday, which is particularly exciting. But I want to start by talking about the news out of Tennessee yesterday, out of Knoxville, with Nico Iamaleava, the Volunteers quarterback, former Volunteers quarterback, who has entered the transfer portal right around Tennessee's spring game, which was yesterday. And the news was actually kind of surprising for me because I didn't think a school would actually do what Tennessee has done. But it sets an interesting precedent for the future of college football and other players and at other schools who might do the same, or at least attempt to do the same. So Nico was trying to, and I can't believe we're using these terms in college sports, but Nico was trying to renegotiate his contract, his NIL contract with the Volunteers, which, what in the world, man? This is college sports, and we're talking about contract negotiations and players, let's just call it free agency, players entering free agency if their current team does not pay them what they think they're worth. So Nico Iamaleava wanted approximately $4 million from the University of Tennessee, according to ESPN. The University of Tennessee football program said, no, we're not paying you that much money. So Nico threatened, well, he didn't threaten. He no-showed Friday practice, and he was also, it came out, going to no-show the spring game yesterday. So then the news emerges that Nico is entering the transfer portal. And I honestly commend Tennessee. I've never said those words for anything, but I commend Tennessee for doing this because if they were to cave and news got out that they caved, it would have set a very dangerous precedent, I think, for other college athletes, not just at Tennessee, but at schools around the country, that, oh, you can hold out, you can skip practice, you can be selfish at the expense of your teammates, and you can make more money doing it. But Tennessee did not let Nico Iamaleava do that. So good on Josh Heupel, good on Tennessee for not letting their quarterback's ego get too big and rule the locker room. I'd like to go back to Nico's season. He was a true freshman starting quarterback in the SEC. But you look at the numbers that he put up, and we'll take a look at his best performances this season and his worst, because I think what you'll find is that he is not worth $4 million or anywhere close to that amount of money. So you look at Nico's stats on a game-by-game basis. 3 touchdowns, 314 passing yards against Chattanooga. That doesn't count because it's Tennessee beating up on an inferior opponent in the first week of the season. Tennessee then plays NC State in the Dukes Mayo Classic, wins 51-10. But Nico, through the air, 16 of 23, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, to go along with 8 rushing attempts for 65 yards and a touchdown. Okay, so he threw a couple picks, racked up about 280 total yards. That's fine. Kent State, we're going to ignore that game. But Nico went 10 for 16 with 173 and 1. Not great, but it doesn't matter because Tennessee won 71-0. Let's go to the SEC games that Tennessee played. We begin with Oklahoma. Nico Iamaleava, the $4 million quarterback, allegedly. 13 of 21 for 194 and 1 to go along with 8 rush attempts for 15 yards and no touchdowns. Okay, so just over 200 yards. But, it's fine. It's his first SEC game of his career, so you can give him a pass because Tennessee ended up winning by 10. They went to Arkansas the next week, lost 19-14. Nico, 17 of 29 for 158, no touchdowns, 11 rush attempts for 17 yards and no touchdowns. He also took 4 sacks, which is one off what would be his season high. Nico Iamaleava threw for over 200 yards in conference play on just 2 occasions. Once against Vanderbilt, where he threw for 257 yards and 4 touchdowns in the final week of the regular season. And then again against Kentucky, where he threw for 292 yards and a touchdown, rushed for 14 yards on 7 attempts. So the guy who thinks he's worth $4 million per season averaged what? He didn't put up exactly outstanding numbers. I think it's fair to say. You look at his average production on a per game basis. He threw for 2,616 yards in 13 games. That's an average of 201 passing yards per game. You look at his rushing yards, 28 per game, 27.5. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. So he averaged 229 total yards of offensive output per game. Also, 22 total touchdowns in 13 games to go along with 5 interceptions. So, what? He's slightly above average? I mean, if Nico thinks that he's worth $4 million for an average of 200 passing yards and 20 rushing yards per game and 19 passing touchdowns in 13 games, including none in the college football playoff against Ohio State, where Tennessee got completely dominated by the Buckeyes, no passing touchdowns against Ohio State, Georgia, Florida, or Arkansas, and just one against Oklahoma in SEC play. Now, I think he did inflate his numbers a little bit late in the year, did Nico Iamaleava, with 4 touchdown performances against Vanderbilt and UTEP. Because, remember, SEC teams do this thing in late November where they play a non-conference game because they're scared of going to 9 conference games like the Big Ten plays. The SEC only plays 8. So Tennessee played UTEP on November 23rd, and Nico got to pad his stats a little bit. But my whole thing is, if Nico, again, who threw for 2,600 yards this year, thinks that he's worth $4 million per season, then what is Curtis Rourke worth? A guy who threw for 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns this season for a passer rating of 176. By comparison, Nico Iamaleava threw for 400 fewer yards, 8 fewer touchdowns, the same amount of interceptions, and a passer rating 31 points lower than Curtis Rourke did Nico Iamaleava. So that means Curtis Rourke, if he were to have another season of eligibility, could ask for what, $6 million? I'm obviously being a little bit hyperbolic to make a point here. And the point is that college football and college basketball have both been absolutely ruined by NIL. It's already happened. I think we're past the point of using the future tense to describe this, like, oh, NIL is going to ruin college sports. I think it already has, because before, and we've talked about this before, but before this era, before really the last couple of years, you never heard reporters say things like, oh, Kansas freshman Flory Badunga has agreed to a new deal to remain in Lawrence. A big get for Bill Self as the Jayhawks look to rebound from a disappointing season. We never used to hear about that. We never used to talk about guys negotiating new deals with their schools. That's honestly, maybe I sound like an old man, but that's absurd. That really is absurd. I mean, Carson Beck transfers from Georgia to Miami, reportedly gets $4 million. Darian Mensah out of Tulane gets a 2-year, $8 million deal to transfer to Duke. These are basically just free agency contracts now. It's like Major League Baseball, where, you know, the highest bidder usually wins. Like, think about Juan Soto. The Mets gave him $765 million over 15 years. Shohei Ohtani got $700 million over 10 years. Obviously, there's a lot of deferred money in there, but the idea is the same, right? Teams bid on the best players. The players think they're worth more money than they actually are, and somebody is going to be willing to pay it to get them on their roster. Nico Iamaleava is not worth $4 million. There's absolutely no way. At least with Carson Beck, he can justify it by saying, oh, I put up 3,500 yards and 28 touchdowns. I led my team to a deep postseason run. I'm a veteran. I'm experienced. I have a track record of winning at Georgia. If I'm Carson Beck, that's what I'm saying. Because it's true. And sure, he threw a lot of interceptions, but he also produced quite a bit. And then Gunnar Stockton came in and won over the fans, and it looks like Georgia's moving up with him. But with Nico, let's be honest, yes, he's a freshman. He'll be a sophomore, obviously, next year. But he's not very good, at least not yet. And I get it. It's hard to be a true freshman starting quarterback at any level, college or high school. But Nico threw for 104 yards in a college football playoff game. Yes, Ohio State was really, really good. But you would think that he would have been a little bit smarter because Tennessee didn't budge. And again, I commend them for that. And also there's a report that came out about Dan Lanning, Oregon's head coach, saying, hey, Josh Heupel, your quarterback is shopping himself around for deals. And so Josh Heupel gets wind of that, says to Nico, hey, if you want more money, we're not going to give it to you. And Nico says, okay, well, then I'm not going to practice. And then Josh Heupel says, well, okay, well, at that point, you're being selfish and you're a detriment to the team, so you can go get that money somewhere else. Goodbye. And that's exactly what Tennessee did. So, again, I commend Tennessee for this, even though they leave themselves in a very tough spot. Very, very tough spot. Only 2 quarterbacks on the Volunteers roster now. But again, Tennessee was aware that Nico's representatives reached out to at least one other school, that school being Oregon, to gauge their interest. And Oregon said, no, we're good, because they're smart. And if Nico's going to leave Tennessee to go chase a bag, then who's to say he's not going to leave Oregon to chase a bag if things don't go his way? So again, that's a very, very smart move by Tennessee and a very smart move by Oregon to reject his advances. I do think, though, that if Nico ultimately ends up getting $4 million a year from somebody, then other players are going to have agents in their ears that are saying, hey, you see what Nico Iamaleava did? He left his school and got a bigger paycheck somewhere else. If you don't like where you're at, I've got these schools that are willing to pay you this money. All you got to do is enter the transfer portal. I just feel like something's going to change. Something has to change at this point, right? Because you cannot you have it, I guess, in pro sports with contract holdouts like the Colts had with Jonathan Taylor a couple years back. And of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers, like Le'Veon Bell's contract holdout, and I think it was 2018. But those guys are professional athletes. These guys are supposed to be student athletes. And at least for football, you can make the argument that, yeah, usually they have time to go to class at least 3 days out of the week. But at what point are we going to stop lying to ourselves? Because I've said it before, and I'll say it again, the student athlete is dead. Nico Iamaleava, in trying to renegotiate his contract, right, is no longer a student athlete. So I feel like we need to stop lying to ourselves, rip the Band-Aid off, and just say, hey, okay, the student athlete is dead, and we're going to start calling this the Professional Sports Development League, because that's really all it is at this point. These guys don't go to class, man. But I'll tell you more about that after the break. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you. Thinking about how the future of college athletics is really, really, I think it's safe to say it's up in the air. I don't think that's actually a controversial take at all. But as someone who's a college student, it's a little weird because you've got these people on campus who represent your school, whether it's on the gridiron or it's on the basketball court, who represent your school on the national scale, and they get a massive spotlight shined on them, especially at a school like Indiana in the Big Ten, where the football buzz needs no introduction, and the basketball team is in the spotlight, whether it's good or bad. It's just weird because, again, the whole thing with Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee wanting a new contract, which this is literally just professional sports. But anyway, he wants a new contract. He doesn't get it. Word gets around to the school that he's been shopping for deals from schools like Oregon, aka, as I would call it, testing free agency, right? And then Tennessee says, you know what, we're good. We've got other quarterbacks who aren't as selfish and put themselves ahead of their team, so you can leave. It's just weird to think that I go to the same school as these people, student athletes, the term that the NCAA uses. I'll just call them athletes because they're not students anymore. At least most of them are not. It's weird to think that we are, in the case of, say, a lot of athletes are in the sport marketing program here at IU. So technically, in the case of a few, I'm taking the same class as them, which means that in theory, I would be expected to do the same work as them. Or let me reverse that. They would be expected to do the same work as me. But that's not the case. It's just not. Again, I've talked this. My sport marketing class has been very good for content, I guess, throughout this semester, but it's not been good for my blood pressure, and I don't think it's going to be good for my GPA. But who cares about GPA in college, right? Just keep it above a 3.0 and you're fine. Show up to class, and that's half the battle, right? But I would hate to think that changing would be because of something completely out of my control, but there's a very real possibility that it might. My sport marketing group has an athlete in it, and this athlete, who I will not name because I have not named them throughout the semester, this athlete went to class on the first day, went to class again about 2 weeks later, and then did not show up until we had a group presentation in this class earlier last week. And this was a slideshow, which, think of it like a kind of a sales pitch type presentation. You've got to explain why you're the best group for the job. And this particular athlete in this group, again, I'm not using the term student athlete because I've seen this person in class 3 times in 3 months. That's at least that's consistent. 1 time a month. I know what to expect at this point, right? But no, this athlete has been to class 3 times the whole semester. And as far as the group presentation goes, you would expect everybody to contribute equally. But that is not what happened. This and other people in the group were guilty of this too, right? Not just the athlete in question, but he did not look at the slides even at all until a day before we presented. And our athlete for this presentation was someone who grew up on the West Coast and played college ball in their respective sport in the Pacific Northwest, which is commonly abbreviated as PNW. I think that's a fair assessment that that's something that a lot of people use when talking about that region of the country. So I put that on the slides, which again, I pretty much made this entire slideshow. Other people in the group, including this athlete, did not help at all, and it showed when we presented. So this athlete comes in, and keep in mind, we're a group, so you would think, and I don't know this for sure, but you would think that everybody's going to get the same grade because everybody is supposed to be an equal weight-carrying part of this group. And I'm talking, of course, about how the student athlete is dead and we need to stop lying to ourselves about it. Well, on presentation day, this member of the group, who happens to be an athlete here at IU, we're presenting in front of the room. It's your typical lecture hall, right? We've got a massive projector in the front of the classroom where we're presenting from, and ideally your body language should be that is open, and it should convey that you understand the subject matter. Well, this athlete turned their back to the audience, including our professor and other faculty members from within this department, and read straight off the slides while looking in the opposite direction because he had not shown up to class at all that semester and did not put in any sort of effort to even remotely understand what the presentation was about. even though he's supposed to be, at least as far as I'm aware, and at least as far as I would think is fair, right? He's supposed to be a load-bearing member of this group in the same way that I am a load-bearing member of this group. Somehow we are expected to do the same amount of work, and I would assume get the same grade for it. Well, I don't think that's going to happen, because if we get the same grade, judging by what happened during the presentation earlier this week, we're both going to get an F, even though I did more than my fair share of the work. And our professor was speaking to us in a sort of Q&A after we gave our presentation and said, hey, this slideshow feels like it was done entirely by one person, and I think the lack of group synergy reflects that. I'm paraphrasing his words a little bit, but that's the idea of what he said. And I was kind of given the wide-eyed stare straight at the ground when he said that, because that's exactly what happened. But as soon as he kind of turned his back, he did turn his back to the classroom, this athlete, who I will not name, I kind of knew, we're not getting a good grade on this. And I haven't checked to see whether or not this assignment has been graded yet. But again, if the NCAA is going to keep lying to us about how these are student athletes we're talking about, and how they put in the same work in the classroom and they put in a ton of work to be elite athletes, right? Because that's what they say. That's what the NCAA says is true. It's not. And again, I think it's a massive lie. And anybody who believes that lie is either ignorant or just stupid. Because these are not student athletes anymore. These are just professional athletes who happen to play at a place where some other people do academic work. This assignment has not been graded yet. And I kind of hope it's not. I kind of hope I never see the grade for this assignment, because I know it's going to be bad. And I also know that in this class, we have another assignment that is due around finals week, which is in about 4 weeks, I believe. I guess 3. Holy cow. It's coming up fast. This assignment is about a 15-page report plan, marketing plan, where our group, I stress, including this athlete, and there are other athletes in this class. It's not like this is the only one. There are other athletes in this class, and our group has to come up with a 15-page marketing plan for a sport organization. And I'm not expecting any contribution from most other people in the group, but especially not the athlete, because now this athlete is committed to play somewhere else, and there is absolutely no reason for him to do anything, because probably got at least some sort of chunk of change to skip town. I would assume. Whether this athlete is worth that money or not, I don't know. But again, I've said it before, and I will continue to say it until the NCAA acknowledges it. Well, then again, I don't know if they ever will. They could totally just give up all control with college athletics and turn it over to the conferences, and then the SEC and the Big Ten are going to rule everything until the end of the world. But until somebody in the decision-making arm of college sports acknowledges that the student-athlete is a lie, it's as big of a lie as the 405 consecutive sellouts thing is with Nebraska football. I feel like we all kind of know it's not true. And okay, fine. Even if they have sold out that many consecutive games, they have not had that many consecutive games attended by a capacity crowd at Nebraska Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. There is no way that is true. That's the way I kind of look at the whole student-athlete thing. Are there some sports where the athletes actually go to class? Yes. I've seen that with my own two eyes as well. But as far as an NCAA-wide thing, no, the rules are absolutely not the same. And I understand. Playing a college sport is hard. I get it. But that's what you signed up for. And you're going to talk about how, these athletes work so hard away from their respective sports, whether it's on the field, on the hardwood, whatever, in the pool. But I'm talking mostly about the revenue sports here, football and men's basketball, especially men's basketball. if you're going to talk about how hard these athletes work off the floor because they have to remain academically eligible, stop lying. Just stop lying. Because if I did the same work or lack thereof that this particular athlete did, there is absolutely no way I would be eligible to participate in an NCAA-sanctioned sport, or any sport for that matter. In college club bowling, which I participated in for 2 years, you had to have at least a 2.0 GPA to be eligible. And there is absolutely no way that if I went to class 3 times in 3 months and did absolutely nothing on a group project, turned my back to the classroom when presenting the slides that I did not look at until the day before the presentation, there is absolutely no way that I would be academically eligible. But the rules are not the same for the average student like myself and the student athletes. And I'm not saying that because I'm mad that I'm not as good at sports as they are. My time, I haven't played a competitive sport outside of bowling in 6 years. I get it. Unless you want to count intramural softball, which I don't. But it's not that. I know what I signed up for, but it's really, really annoying when you've got student athletes in these classes. I say in these classes generously because especially when it comes to men's basketball, and the season is over. I feel like they should be in class, but they're just not. We just need to stop lying to ourselves. The NCAA needs to stop lying to the public because anybody who knows anything knows that when you have people like Nico Iamaleava negotiating new contracts with their freaking schools, it's not the same anymore. And it's fine if it's not. Like the college football playoff this past year was great. March Madness this year was great. But they're not students anymore. They're just they're athletes in a developmental system looking to go pro. So something's got to change. And I feel like something will change, especially with revenue sharing coming down the pipe this fall. Something's going to change. So don't be surprised when it does, because I think this is so far beyond saving now that the NCAA or somebody, maybe it's the conferences, I don't know, somebody's got to just bite the bullet and call it what it is, and that is a minor league for professional sports. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. It's a great time to save at IU Credit Union. Go to iucu.org to see their most current money market savings and certificate rates. That's iucu.org. So we look at, well, talking about college football, right? We look at college football in Bloomington. There's a team on 17th Street, the Indiana Hoosiers. You may have heard of them, led by this guy called Curt Cignetti. And this past week, Curt Cignetti, this past Thursday, was a man possessed. A man possessed after spring practice number 10. I'm disappointed because these practices, the press conferences take place on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 a.m. And at that point, I'm usually either trying to get out of bed to go to class or going to class. Either way, I get to class on time, so don't worry about it. But I'm disappointed because I don't get to go to these press conferences like I did on Mondays during the season last year. But anyway, Cignetti looked like a man possessed in this press conference. He starts it by saying, referring to the latest spring practice, "I think today we squandered an opportunity to improve as much as possible. We were inconsistent in too many areas, probably not mentally prepared to come out and do what it takes to have a successful practice and improve as much as possible." And the whole time he's looking around the room, wide-eyed, staring daggers. And he goes on, "Good players want to be coached. Great players, you can't coach them enough. They want more coaching. You can't give them enough. Inconsistent players want coached on their terms. And today we had too many inconsistent players." And he said he's not worried about what the tape looks like 4 months from now when Indiana opens its season. His focus is on what Indiana was today, referring to Thursday. What we were today and what we put on tape. So that is what I like. Cignetti says, we didn't have enough juice out there today. Too many coaches yelling to get going because guys weren't ready to practice. I'm not saying every guy, but a good number. Up to today, the effort and energy has been good. But the latest practice was not. And I like it. I like that he's obsessed about it. I think that's what a head coach should be. I like the mindset, right? Because that's what Cignetti has preached since he's been here, and as far as I'm aware, since he's been a coach, right? The idea that you can't get complacent, you can't get comfortable, you can't rest on your laurels. I don't think that's a mindset that's unique to any coach. But to see him publicly espouse it so much and just say, yeah, flat out, we weren't good enough today, I think that's going to light a fire under a lot of people, and I think that's a very good thing. So the spring game is coming up this Thursday, 8 o'clock at Memorial Stadium. Cignetti calls it what I've called it and what anybody has ever called it, if you're aware of it. It's a glorified practice. That's what Curt Cignetti called it. That's what I'll continue to define it as. He said they basically play a half offense-defense. You're done. It's not really a game in my mind. It's a glorified practice. It's going to be the only time we tackle this spring. Actions speak louder than words in the fact that Indiana is going through with its spring game because a lot of programs have canceled theirs. And they do it mostly because a lot of these spring games are televised, and you think, oh, well, if we play a spring game, we're basically putting practice film out there for other schools to see. So we don't want to do that. Cignetti says, I don't have an opinion about other people canceling their spring games. It's not on TV. It's just another practice. And he says actions speak louder than words, and that Indiana is going through with its spring game while other teams are canceling theirs. So I'm one of those people who, yeah, it would be cool to go to Memorial Stadium, and maybe I will go on Thursday night. But also, at the same time, it's just a glorified practice. And what you see, now and what you see 4 months from now are probably going to be very different. Because I remember the spring game last year. Taven Jackson looked like he was miles better than Curtis Rourke. And a lot of that ended up being Indiana's second-team defense that wasn't really that good compared to the first-team defense. But I remember leaving Memorial Stadium thinking, holy cow, Taven Jackson is the truth. He was not. So it's a good reminder, if anybody doesn't, to take everything you see in the spring game, if you go, with a grain of salt. Now, I think there will be more people at the spring game this year than there were last year. It's being played at the exact same time on the exact same day, the third Thursday in April, or the second Thursday in April, the third one. The third Thursday in April at 8 o'clock. It was supposed to be on a Saturday at noon, but that's not happening. I think it's because they didn't want to interfere with Indiana baseball, and we'll get into them in a little bit. But I think that people should go to the spring game if you want to just be back at Memorial Stadium, but don't expect to see too much. It's like Cignetti said, it's a glorified practice. But it's always good to have buzz around Indiana football. It's good to have people talking about Indiana football again. I'm excited. I've said it a lot. I'm very excited for this coming season. I can't wait. I think it's going to be a very fun season. I think it's going to be a lot more. I'm not going to say last year wasn't challenging, right? But the schedule was obviously very favorable. I think this one is going to be a more, a more up and down season, if that makes any sense. Indiana plays tougher opponents, a very tough schedule, and I'm excited to see what they can do. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. So we talk about Indiana baseball. So we'll talk about Indiana baseball a little bit. They are in Illinois right now, wrapping up a 3-game series against the Illini today. And they've been rolling since the calendar flipped to April. The Hoosiers have won, let's see, off the top of my head, 5 of 6. Since the month began, let's see, the Hoosiers losing, so it would be 4 of 6. Losing to Louisville, sweeping Michigan State, which, by the way, they killed Michigan State last weekend in that doubleheader, which I guess was on a Monday, so it was not the weekend. 14-2 and 18-2 in back-to-back games to wrap up a sweep of the Spartans. And then beating Ball State. Those teams always play each other close. It was 7-5 this time around, and they will meet again a week from Wednesday at Victory Field in Indianapolis. Indiana's pitching staff, we talked about it a little bit earlier on this show. The pitching staff was very bad to start the season. Couldn't hold late leads, gave up a ton of runs sometimes, but since the calendar flipped to April, the staff has actually been really good. You look at the runs given up on a per-game basis, 6 against Louisville, and then 4, 2, and 2 against Michigan State, 5 against Ball State, 4, and 3 against Illinois, with the series finale against the Illini coming up at 2 o'clock today in Champaign. So the pitching staff may or may not have figured something out. I think it's fair to say we have a large enough sample size now to say that, by and large, the pitching staff has figured something out, and that's really good. Now, the offense went quiet on Friday night. A Division III transfer for Illinois went 7 innings, and Indiana only scored 2 runs. You're not going to win many games at any level scoring only 2 runs. But the Hoosiers responded yesterday, put up 12 on Illinois, had a couple big innings, including, I think it was a 5-run third inning last night at Illinois. That is really encouraging. Indiana will go for the series win today and then host Indiana State on Tuesday before hosting Maryland. Maryland's always a tough out. This coming weekend, although, as it seems is always the case, there looks like there will be weather that may impact that series against the Terps, at least a little bit on Saturday coming up. So, all that is to say, Indiana is now 5 games over 500, 20-15, which ties a season high, 10-7 in the Big Ten, which puts them, I would say, 6th or 7th maybe. We'll look at the standings real quick. Indiana baseball, top 5 in the Big Ten, and a tie with Penn State and USC, which does hurt Indiana a little bit because they've already lost series to both of those teams. But you look at the top 5 in the Big Ten entering today: Iowa, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Indiana, Penn State, USC, all tied for 5th. They're in a 3-way tie. So, big game coming up today for Indiana. Every single Big Ten game is from here on out, but the bullpen has been really impressive. Indiana's been kind of piecing these games together. The starters don't necessarily go as deep into games as you might think a starter would, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been effective. So, again, you got a few chances still left, about a month in the regular season, and Indiana will have plenty of home games between now and mid-May when the Big Ten tournament gets underway. So if you have a chance to get out to Bard Kauffman Field, I recommend it because this team is doing pretty much exactly what they did last year and flipping the switch, playing good baseball at the right time. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. Thanks for joining us on this second Sunday in April. There's only 2 left after this, which is just weird because then it means it's May, and the school year is basically over at that point. It also means that Little 500 is over once we get to May. And the grids have been set for a little bit, but the race, less than 2 weeks away, which is very exciting. And I, for one, am looking forward to it because I'll be on the media side of both races this year. Last year was just the women's race, but this year, both races. If you're listening to the radio call of the men's race, I will be alongside Zach Browning for that. I'll be a spotter for the women's broadcast on Friday afternoon as well. That's coming up a week from Friday and Saturday, the world's greatest college weekend in Bloomington. The weather actually should be nice. A couple years back, I remember Indiana baseball played a home series against Ohio. Nobody showed up. It was 40 degrees and cloudy and cold and blech. But I believe this year the weather should be a little bit better for the Little 500, for both the men's and the women's races. Last year, the weather was pretty nice. This year, it should be as well. So looking forward to that. It's always fun being at Bill Armstrong Stadium, whether it's for bike races or it's for IU men's soccer as well. Always fun to be out there. Speaking of fun, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but Indiana baseball is starting to be fun again. I'll be the first to tell you that this team did struggle out the gate this season, as they kind of have for the last couple of years. It's kind of strange. I do think it has something to do with the fact that so many baseball teams from this part of the country and further north than the Midwest play a good chunk of their early season schedule away from home. Not just away from home. In the case of Indiana, in the case of Xavier, both those teams opened the season, I should say, playing a weekend's worth of games in Surprise, Arizona, which is pretty far from this part of the country. You travel a long way. You spend a very, very long stretch of time away from home. And I think that impacts the way that you play and the way you handle things on a day-to-day basis. So I do think that part of it is just Indiana playing games in this part of the country for an extended stretch, because you're seeing some signs of consistency across a larger sample size, which again is good. I never want to overreact. I did say after Indiana lost to Louisville, there was a chance that they could miss the tournament. That was true, and that still is true. But I think any time that you see a team commit 5 errors in one game and lose by 2, that's very discouraging, because it means that game was extremely winnable. Yet somehow the losing team found a way to end up on the wrong side of the scoreline when things were said and done. So that is still true. Indiana could still miss the NCAA tournament, but they're trending in the right direction. And the pitching staff over the last 2 weeks, including that Louisville game, has been really good. Again, we were talking about it earlier, hasn't given up more than 6 runs in a game, has the pitching staff, since the calendar flipped to April. Now, this is only April 13th, so there's still a chance that that could turn in the wrong direction, but you're seeing the same guys show up game after game, week after week at this point, and produce on a consistent basis. And for Indiana, that's guys like Cole Gilly, who was fantastic yesterday. 5 1/3 innings in relief, only gave up 1 run after taking over for starting pitcher Ben Grable. And Ben Grable has been great for Indiana this year as well. He came over from Northwestern prior to last year, did Grable, and was looked at as a potential starter, but suffered an elbow injury before the season even began. And Grable comes back this year, has been a workhorse in multiple different roles for Indiana, as an opener, as a traditional starter, even as a closing pitcher a little bit. Grable, a 4.3 ERA in 31 innings this season. So he's been great. Ryan Kraft has seen a resurgence this year as well. Kraft, a guy who 2 years ago was a first-team All-Big Ten relief pitcher, then really struggled last year, he ended up becoming unpitchable in bigger situations, in leverage situations, the kinds of spots he was so good in a couple years back. But he has really rebounded this season. 30 innings pitched, a 4.20 ERA. Opponents hitting .263 against him. And then we just talked about Cole Gilly. Came over from Indiana State, and he was on those Indiana State teams that made it to back-to-back NCAA regionals in 23 and 24, but he didn't pitch that much. He wasn't a guy who was at the forefront of their pitching staff during those postseason runs. Well, Cole Gilly has been phenomenal for Indiana, and under the tutelage of pitching coach Dustin Glant, he has really just kind of emerged as, I'm not going to say an ace, but definitely the go-to guy on this pitching staff. I don't know that Indiana has a true ace, but I think if anybody can make that case down the stretch this season, it is Cole Gilly. Leads the team in wins, 7-1 record, which again, pitching wins are kind of a fake stat, but over a large enough sample size, you can start to conclude things about pitchers based on their win-loss record. Gilly being 7-1 tells you that he affects winning more than he affects losing. Leads the team in innings pitched at 41 2/3, leads the team in strikeouts, and has only walked 9 guys in almost 42 innings. Opponents hitting under 200 against Cole Gilly, and he's got an ERA of 3.02 and a whip under 1, which also leads all qualified pitchers. So suffice it to say, Cole Gilly is one of the guys for Indiana baseball this year. You also look at guys like Darren Swanson. Swanson, somebody who came over from the University of Southern Indiana. Don't know how much, or sorry, he's a St. Francis transfer. Indiana has a Southern Indiana transfer on the roster. It's Gavin Siebold. But Darren Swanson was an NAIA pitcher at St. Francis prior to this year. But he's a Fort Wayne native. He comes to Indiana. ERA under 4, limited sample size, but he was good for Indiana. 4 1/3 innings in relief against Ball State, and that win on Tuesday. And Ball State, no slouch. Top of the MAC is Ball State. Rich Maloney, seems like he's always got them humming along. Every single year, the Cardinals are a tough out. They always play Indiana close. But Darren Swanson was big for Indiana as well this past Tuesday, so you might see more of him down the stretch this year as well. And these are guys who were all expected to produce when Indiana's season began a couple months back, and some of them just kind of got off to a slow start. And sometimes if you're adjusting to the Big Ten, right, it's tough. But I think Indiana's done a good job of sticking with it, of rolling with the punches. And, Jeff Mercer talks about it like, hey, you're going to have to take your lumps sometimes. You're going to get punched in the mouth. And he said he told his guys this, Indiana's head coach Jeff Mercer, talking about how, you know what, we're going to get up, we're going to keep going. And Indiana's kept going, and they've been great. They've been great as of late, so I would look for that to continue as the season goes on. And I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by what I've seen out of Indiana baseball lately. Again, they'll play in Illinois. The series finale is at 2:00 today. They'll be back home this week. 4 home games. 1 on Tuesday against Indiana State, and then 3 against Maryland before they go to Victory Field and take on Ball State a week from Wednesday. That game last year was rained out. We drove to Indy. It got rained out. We were disappointed, but we did get free food, so that was nice. But I would love for that game to actually be played this year because Victory Field, as many of you probably well know, a great place to watch a baseball game. So we look at Indiana's numbers when you compare them to the rest of the Big Ten. The pitching numbers in conference play, marginally better than last year. Now, Indiana's pitching staff was awful in non-conference play last year. Turn it around in league play, top 5 in the Big Ten in team ERA. Nebraska's pitching staff was phenomenal. They were far and away the best. That is not the case this year. Indiana and Nebraska team ERA separated by just 1 point this year. Nebraska 5.67, Indiana 5.68. Iowa is still a weird team to me. They've played 17 Big Ten games. They lead the Big Ten standings at 14-3 in conference play. But I'm still not convinced that the Hawkeyes are actually that good. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at the RPI, as far as Big Ten baseball is concerned, the RPI, of course, a big metric when it comes to NCAA tournament selection in baseball. Basically, it's your win percentage, your opponent's win percentage, and your opponent's win percentage. So you look at Iowa and where they are in the RPI. Iowa is 79th in the RPI, even though they have dominated Big Ten play. Iowa's record in Big Ten play, the best of the bunch at 14-3. The Hawkeyes are 23-10 overall, which is not the best winning percentage in the Big Ten, but they're in first place in the conference standings by 3 games over UCLA, although Iowa has played one more series than has UCLA and also Oregon as well. So the sample sizes are a little weird right now. They'll even out. But Iowa, 9-1 over their last 10 games. And you look at Cade Obermueller, who is their ace for the Hawkeyes. He's been good for the last few years. But Cade Obermueller this year, 2.18 ERA in 53 innings pitched, second best in the Big Ten. Opponents hitting under 200 against him, and he's striking out a ton of guys. 12.7 strikeouts per 9 for Cade Obermueller of Iowa, which has kind of been his thing the last few years. But then you look at the RPI. Iowa's only 79th. Indiana is 70th in the RPI. Michigan, a team that's 21-14 overall and 8-7 in the Big Ten. Michigan is 46th. USC, who took 2 of 3 against Indiana in Bloomington, is 43rd in the RPI. And then you go back down to the 70s again, and Iowa is 79th, behind Indiana and just ahead of Penn State. Well, why is that? You look at Iowa's strength of schedule, and the picture becomes very clear. Iowa's strength of schedule, barely inside the top 200 nationally, 191st, and a huge part of that, their 237th ranked non-conference strength of schedule, which they played and so far have gone 7-7 against non-conference opponents, even though their non-conference strength of schedule is among the 70 weakest in the entire nation. That is why I'm convinced that Iowa is not actually that good. You look at the Hawkeyes' schedule, and this is important because Indiana goes to Iowa City in about 3 weeks. Actually, 2 weeks. It's the week of the Little 500. You look at who Iowa has played in the conference slate. Rutgers, barely inside the top 100. Michigan State, outside the top 100. Ohio State, outside the top 150. Minnesota, who they swept, and that's really their only quality series win. Northwestern, outside the top 100. Nebraska, barely inside the top 100. They haven't played many good teams in the Big Ten yet. They play Michigan, which will be very tough for them, going to Ann Arbor and then hosting Indiana. And that should give us a better idea. And also, Iowa plays a gauntlet in the final 2 weekends of the regular season. Oregon State and Oregon back-to-back. Whew, that's 2 top 20 teams. Both coming to Iowa, one in Des Moines, one in Iowa City. But that's going to be a very telltale 6 games to show where Iowa actually stands. I don't think Iowa is that good. Well, why is that important? Because Indiana plays Iowa in 2 weeks. And Indiana has already squandered several NCAA tournament resume-boosting opportunities this year. We talked about it before, but the 2 games against Xavier particularly hurt. Blowing the 9-run lead against USC hurt. Losing 2 of 3 against UCLA, well, that's a little bit more understandable because that was on the road, and UCLA is a very good team that has a really solid chance of hosting a regional this year. So good on them. But Indiana's had some chances and hadn't really capitalized on any of them. So you look at the big picture now, and I think it's important for Indiana. You've got to win every conference series from here on out. This rubber game against Illinois at 2 o'clock today, very important. Maryland coming to town, very important. The Terrapins, again, 3-10 in the Big Ten. They got swept by Illinois in Champaign last weekend. They're 5 games under 500. But something in my gut just tells me Maryland always plays Indiana close, at least in the time that I've been here. So I would expect that to continue. And Indiana going to Iowa, we mentioned, and then Purdue and Michigan close the regular season as they did last year. So I think it's very, very attainable for Indiana to win 2 of 3, maybe even get a couple sweeps in there, especially at home. It's important that that's what they do because you want to make sure that you're as consistent as possible and you show the selection committee, just like you showed them last year, that you're playing your best baseball at the right time and you deserve a shot in the NCAA tournament. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back on IU Sports Sunday, it's a great time to save at IU Credit Union. Go to iucu.org to see their most current money market savings and certificate rates. That's IU Credit Union at iucu.org. Nick Rotocap with you. It's sunny. It's kind of warm outside, which, given the weather we've had, I'll take it. Indiana softball, still rolling, still good at softball. Bree Copeland just broke the program record for career home runs. 41, I believe. Let me fact check myself. But this, kind of like what happened to Indiana baseball last year, will be a sort of the end of an era, I think, for Indiana softball. A lot of key players moving on after this year. Bree Copeland, of course, a two-way player who has been a star for Indiana over the last few years. I haven't called any softball games this year, and I've honestly been kind of disappointed because her mom is always a presence at every single game. She's cheering as loud as anybody's ever cheered for Indiana at every single game. And so I know that Indiana will miss her next year after Bree Copeland graduates. But IU softball, 28-11, only 7-6 in the Big Ten. Remember, they had that red-hot start to the season where they won 8 or 9 games in a row after dropping the season opener. But the Hoosiers and Andy Moore Field seems like they're always home at the same time as baseball, which might be by design. I don't know. But they just mercy ruled Wisconsin yesterday. Those two will play in Madison for the series finale today at 1 o'clock. It's a rubber match there as well. Next time they're back home is the same day that IU baseball plays in Indianapolis. IU softball also hosts Ball State. That is on April 23rd at 6 p.m. at Indy Moore Field. And then Oregon comes to town for a classic Big Ten matchup between Indiana and the Ducks. Yeah. I like making that joke because I think it's pretty funny. These classic Big Ten rivalries, like who could forget Rutgers and Washington, those close rivals. I think we look at the Big Ten baseball schedule, those teams might even be playing each other today. I know Austin Render was talking about the out-of-town scoreboard on the IU baseball broadcast yesterday, and I seem to remember him talking about Rutgers. It was Oregon and Maryland. That's right. Oregon and Maryland at Turtle Smith Stadium in College Park. A classic Big Ten rivalry, the Ducks and the Terps, separated by a measly, I'm going to guess, 3,000 miles. And then also USC and Penn State. That's actually an interesting series because one way or another, Indiana will not be tied with both of those teams, USC and Penn State, in the Big Ten standings after today is all wrapped up. So a fun slate of Big Ten baseball coming down the stretch in the final month of this season. I am very excited. I'm always excited for Big Ten baseball. I know you probably never heard anybody say that before, but there's just something about it. Something about it that's just fun. It's chaotic. There are very few games that are normal, and I like that. I like that because I think Major League Baseball and professional baseball as a whole, the players are just too good. It's a little too predictable, other than maybe the Cubs hanging 16 on the Dodgers last night. But for the most part, games are pretty predictable because they're all professionals, so there's a certain level there. But college baseball, there's a certain unpredictability. There are guys who might just come out of nowhere and have a career performance, like we saw with Darren Swanson for Indiana last Tuesday. You just never know what you're going to see in college baseball. Like Cole Gilley, who wasn't looked at closely by Indiana coming out of high school. He's from Columbus, went to Indiana State, didn't do a lot there. I mean, he was there for a few years, but wasn't ever really a big rotation guy. So what does he do for Indiana yesterday? Well, with the team down in the series 1-0, gets the final 16 outs of a game against Illinois, faces the minimum through 5, and allowed his first hit of the game with 2 outs in the 9th. Gilley, as a reliever, went 5 innings without allowing a hit. Caleb Koski, a freshman for Indiana baseball, began his career as a pitcher. His first 5 appearances were as a pitcher. Last Monday, in the second game of that doubleheader against Michigan State, which Indiana went on to win in run rule fashion, Koski gets his first career start in the outfield. He was hitless in his career to that point. He had had some spot at-bats, beginning with a pinch hit appearance against Louisville about a week prior. But Koski comes up to the plate, gets his first career hit. It's a grand slam in the first inning against Michigan State. It's a guy who started as a pitcher. Told head coach Jeff Mercer, hey, I want to hit a little bit. Jeff Mercer says, okay, we'll let you hit. We'll give you some at-bats. We'll see what you can do. And then he goes and hits a grand slam in his first career start. Those are the kinds of things that you don't see very often, if ever, in professional baseball. But you see them all the time in college baseball. Hogan Denny and Koski, both freshmen, who Denny was an everyday starter at the beginning of the season, slumped as some freshmen do, but gets back in the starting lineup yesterday. He and Koski both had 3 hit games and 3 RBI days as well. Then you have guys like Devin Taylor, who, even though he hasn't homered in a couple weeks, which for him is, I think, maybe the longest home run-less stretch of his career, because if you know Devin Taylor, you know he hits home runs, right? But Devin Taylor hitting .376 through 35 games. Jake Hanley, a true freshman, probably going to win Big Ten Freshman of the Year. Came in as a pitcher, a two-way player. Probably a better pitcher than he is a hitter. And he's hitting .360 with an OPS over 1,000. Corbin Dickerson, transferred in from Louisville, was a spot starter, very limited playing time for the Cardinals. Comes to Indiana, makes some adjustments to his swing. He's hitting .353 with an 1100 OPS, leads the team with 15 home runs. And let me give you some perspective here. Last year, Indiana's RBI leader was Tyler Cerny. Indiana in 2024, as a team, played 60 games. Cerny started in every single one, had 60 RBIs in 60 games. Corbin Dickerson, the Louisville transfer, who barely played for the Cardinals in 2 years, one of which was a redshirt year. Dickerson has played all 35 games for Indiana this year and already has 58 RBIs. Entering this weekend, he was tied for second in the country with 15 home runs. Again, this is a guy who barely played at his last stop. Comes to Indiana and has just been on a tear. Those are the kinds of stories that you love in college baseball. Players who maybe you've never even heard of because they haven't done anything, bursting onto the scene and making a name for themselves at a new stop. In the case of Dickerson, he goes from just outside his hometown of Jeffersonville, Indiana, to Bloomington, and he's been playing great. He's been playing great in center field for Indiana. So all that is to say that if you like, the side of sports, guys working extremely hard behind the scenes, getting rewarded for it on a big stage, and doing it in an Indiana uniform, well, college baseball might be for you. I know it's hard to watch, Big Ten Plus and all that. I've heard the complaints about Big Ten Plus, and it's kind of disappointing as someone who broadcasts games on Big Ten Plus. But if you even just listen to the games, if you follow them along, if you follow written coverage like mine at the Hoosier Network, wherever you follow college baseball, it doesn't even have to be the Big Ten. It could be the SEC, the ACC, because those games get televised on ESPN, right? Big Ten Network doesn't really care that much about baseball. They'd rather televise spring games, which is fine. That's their right. I don't agree with it, but that's what they do. So if you don't want to watch Big Ten baseball, then just follow SEC baseball. But if you like the fun side of sports, the chaotic side of college sports, college baseball might be for you, especially in this era now where we're talking about college sports being ruined. Well, there's not a lot of NIL money in college baseball. A lot of these guys, most of them, let's be honest, just like any other sport, will not go pro, especially in baseball, where it's notoriously difficult to play professionally. But they do it because they love the game, and they work as hard as anybody I've ever seen in any sport. And it's cool to see them get rewarded. And it's fun to follow. College baseball's chaotic, but it's fun. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. I want to talk about what we addressed, I would say briefly, but not briefly at the top of the show, about Nico Iamaleava, the Tennessee quarterback, former Tennessee quarterback, hitting the transfer portal after he tried to hold out for more NIL money and it didn't work. We talked about his numbers and how Curtis Rourke put up better passing numbers than he did. Anyway, Nico, in 13 games last year, did not rank higher than 36th among quarterbacks in any of the following categories. Pass yards per game, which he was 76th with 201 passing yards per game. His 63.8 completion percentage ranked 43rd. Passing touchdowns, he had 19 of those. That's 42nd. And QBR, 70.5, which ranked 36th. Says he wants $4 million per year in NIL money. That's about what Carson Beck got to transfer to Miami. The difference is he's not worth that money. And the numbers prove it. You've seen a lot of this in college sports. Guys sign these NIL deals. Can we just call them contracts? I'm going to start calling them contracts because they're not NIL deals anymore. Steve Alford said it a month ago now. There is no player, okay, very few, if any. There are very few, if any, players who are worth that valuation just on their name, image, and likeness alone. Like, maybe in Knoxville, Nico's face or name on a product would be worth a lot of money, but not $4 million a year. No way, man. What, just because a 19-year-old college football player puts his name and face on something, I'm supposed to be swayed to buy it? You're going to honestly tell me that that's why he's worth $4 million? No, he's not. So, Nico wants a $4 million per year contract. Let's call it that. And by the way, there are some NFL players, I'm talking mostly specialists, kickers, long snappers, punters. There are some NFL players who make less than that. And they play more games. And their business is more cutthroat, right? If you're a kicker, let's use Matt Gay as an example because the Colts just released him, which kind of surprised me. Matt Gay had an annual salary with the Colts of $5.625 million. So a little bit over what Nico was making, but Matt Gay is a professional kicker. Yeah? That was his most recent contract with the Colts. Matt Gay got released by the Colts after, in 2 years, making about 81% of his field goals and 99% of his PATs. Matt Gay got released because he wasn't good enough. Nico Iamaleava, and he's not the only one. Again, I'm just using him as an example because he's the most recent domino to fall in this whole NIL thing. Nico wanted $4 million a year to be statistically, again, just looking at his raw numbers, statistically, the 36th best quarterback in college football. If you're the 36th, and I know there are way more teams, and I'm comparing apples to oranges, but if you're the 36th best quarterback in the NFL, you're not even a starter. If you're the 36th best quarterback in college football, you probably don't deserve to start for an SEC school, which is why Tennessee let him walk. Because he wasn't actually that good. Steve Alford said it a month ago, that players are receiving this money before they ever produce, and that it's a bad lesson to teach them. Because that's not how it works in the real world. In anything. Literally anywhere. You'd be very hard-pressed to find somebody who's going to give you money before you ever do anything to earn that money. But that's what's happening in college sports, and that's why it's so strange. That's why it's so messed up. Indiana basketball spent $5 million, approximately, on its roster last year. About $2 million of that went to Oumar Ballo before he ever produced. He was looked at as the best transfer in the country by a lot of people. Not just at the center position, but overall. He didn't play like it. He played okay. He played all right. Like he was fine. He had some good games. He had a cool dunk against Purdue. Indiana basically ran its entire offense through Oumar Ballo, but he didn't play like a player who was worth $2 million. He just didn't. Yes, he averaged a double-double, but he wasn't as much of a needle mover as I think a lot of people were expecting. He was first team all Pac-12 at Arizona. What was he, third team all conference at IU, if that, right? I think he was maybe third team all conference. He was a preseason all conference man. He didn't even make third team all Big Ten. He was honorable mention all conference in the Big Ten. He was two-time first team all Pac-12. Indiana signed him based on potential. Didn't live up to it, which is fine. It happens. There's also a report that IU gave $500,000 to Trey Galloway. What in the world? That's the problem. These players have agents. They have people in their camps, in their ears, telling them they're worth way more than they actually are. They believe that they're worth that much money, and then they get the money up front before they ever do anything, so they don't actually have to earn it like, everybody else since the dawn of time. Nico wanted $4 million after a season where by QBR he was the 36th best quarterback in college football. So what? Does that mean a quarterback that put up Curtis Rourke's numbers should get more? Because that's the precedent that you'd set, and that's not a very good precedent. So, again, all this is to say that the model of NIL, what it has become, is completely broken. It was never supposed to be like this on its face, and I know that there's always something more to it, and that deep down, a lot of the people who push for this probably had this exact thing in mind when it comes to just giving players whatever they want. I think it's fair for college athletes to want to be compensated for if they put their face on a shirt, or if they appear, say, on the cover of College Football 25, or if they let video game developers like Electronic Arts use their name, their face, their likeness, their name, image, and likeness in the college football video game, or in college basketball video games, maybe in the future, or college baseball video games, which selfishly I really want to happen. That's fine. If that's just what NIL was, I don't think anybody would have a problem with it, because that is something that any other college student can do. You could sign autographs, you could profit off yourself. That was always the main argument for NIL, was that, oh, Johnny Manziel got in trouble for signing autographs, but if anybody other than a Texas A&M football player were to go to Texas A&M and sign autographs and profit off of it, nobody would bat an eye. That's not fair. So I understand from that angle why people wanted NIL. But what it has become over the last 4 years is nothing like what it was originally presented as. It's become survival of the richest in college athletics, where, okay, we're Ohio State football. We're going to throw blank checks at every single high-value transfer. Or Oregon. Oregon's basically been a throw money at the wall and hope it fixes our problems for a while in football. NIL's only exacerbated that. They didn't even want Nico, which shows you how bad he actually is. Louisville basketball is reportedly spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million on its basketball roster for this coming season. So what? You're just hoping money can solve all your problems? Because again, ask Indiana men's basketball. Money does not solve all your problems. Money can get you a bunch of hired guns. It can get you a bunch of mercenaries that maybe, if they fit together, can play well. But in the case of Indiana, they did not play well. I think maybe money feeds into a player's ego. I think when anyone between the age of 18 and 21, 22, Umar Ballo's like 27, but whatever. Anybody between 18 and 22 sees that much money waved in front of them, it's going to inflate your ego a little bit, right? I feel like it just does. Like if I was to get that much money to do something, I would think I'm the bee's knees. I'm the best thing since sliced bread at this thing. And then when things don't work, well, I already got my money, so I don't care. I can just go somewhere else, get another bag, and who cares, right? I think maybe that has something to do with it as well. NIL cannot continue as a survival of the richest. Because if it does, you're never going to see a mid-major make a run in March Madness ever again. You're just not. You're just not. Like what happened with Drake this year, beating Missouri, that was actually very predictable. But their head coach is gone. All their players got poached. Indiana State, all their players got poached after last year. Their head coach is gone. So you get used to seeing fewer upsets. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years we get another Final Four that's all one seeds. We get another really chalky tournament because the rich will continue to get richer at the expense of the other schools. Revenue sharing is going to exacerbate this problem because athletic departments at small schools just cannot compete. They do not have the money to keep these players around if they get it in their heads that they're worth more than they actually are. So you're going to see fewer Cinderella stories, I think, across all of college sports, but especially in men's basketball. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. The NBA regular season wrapping up this afternoon. The Pacers are in Cleveland. They played the Cavs earlier this week, and they'll finish the regular season against the Cavaliers. 1 o'clock tip right here on WGCL. Pacers have already locked up a date with the Bucks. They've got home court advantage in the first round of the NBA playoffs this year as well. A rematch of last year, which, again, I don't mind because last year's NBA playoffs were really fun, and it's the first time I had actually enjoyed watching the playoffs as a Pacers fan in a very long time. So I'm stoked for that. I'm grabbing my popcorn. I'm going to eat it while I watch Pacers Bucks because that's going to be cinema. Big day across the sporting world. Mentioned the NBA regular season wrapping up. The Heat and Bulls have a scheduled play-in date with each other. I feel like that's a yearly thing at this point. It's kind of funny. They should really just call it the Miami-Chicago Invitational because it seems like those two always find a way to match up in the play-in tournament pretty much every season. But we've also got, of course, the final round of the Masters coming up this afternoon, which is I really want to go to Augusta. I'm not a big golf fan. I have a horrible golf swing, probably because I spent so long playing baseball when I was younger, so I've got a horrible slice that I need to fix. At some point, I sound like an old man, but I would love to go to Augusta one day. It looks amazing. Looks magical, to be honest. And I have a very, very high amount of respect for those at the Masters. Also, in the world of Formula One, they're finally, I think, done racing at ungodly hours, at least for a little bit. The Bahrain Grand Prix at 11 o'clock. Japan was at like 2 a.m. last week, and the race was a snooze fest on top of that, so that didn't help. China was at 3 a.m. Just kind of what comes with being an F1 fan early in the season, but F1 will race in Canada soon, Miami soon, Austin, Texas in the fall, Mexico, Brazil, and then Las Vegas, of course, as well in late November. And a lot is going to change between now and then, but it's an exciting time. Again, Indiana baseball is rolling. Indiana softball, not rolling as much, but that's okay. Spring game is on Thursday, 8 p.m. at Memorial Stadium. Curt Cignetti said it's a glorified practice. I think it's a glorified practice, but if you want to come out and see Fernando Mendoza, he seems like the real deal. So I'm excited to see what he can do. A quarterback that has the arm talent of Curtis Rourke and hopefully will have 2 functioning ACLs, unlike Curtis Rourke did last season. So grab your popcorn. We're about 4 months out from the start of football season. The NBA playoffs just getting underway here this week, as are the NHL playoffs as well, I believe. So those are always fun to watch. The college baseball regular season entering its final month, so it's a good time to be following sports all around the United States and the world as well. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday.